As one of the biggest rappers in the industry, Tupac made a lot of enemies. But the day he pissed off Chicago gangs so bad that they put a bounty on his head, that was definitely one of the most unforgettable beefs he had.
We got banned from going to Milwaukee for a long time.
Crazy, man. Pac was a wild dude, man. So y'all got banned from Milwaukee because of Tupac.
Yeah, it started a riot.
Unlike his other beefs, this was different. Chicago gangs have never been known to play around, so having them take out a hit on you, no one wants that. Now, the funny thing is, this whole thing didn't even start from a diss track or industry issues. No, it started because Pac was just not afraid to call out Gangster disciples at a public show.
Gets on stage and it's like 300 Gangster disciples in the first front 3 rows.
He was raw, he was angry, and he didn't flinch. He stood his ground, calling them out right from the stage. And the gangs, you can say they definitely didn't like it. From being psyched about Tupac's performance, the mood changed, and they were out for blood.
There was some real motherfuckers around there and in the audience, and they felt offended when they were addressed like they were. So that's what caused the melee, that's what caused the riot.
So what got Tupac so incensed? What got him so mad he practically forgot just how dangerous Chicago gangs can be? Let's get into it. So the whole drama kicked off while Tupac was on tour, celebrating the success of his album. At the time, his biggest hits were I Get Around and Keep Ya Head Up. He had also just dropped Pour Out a Little Liquor on August 23, 1994. Meanwhile, Pac and his group, Thug Life, had just wrapped up their album, which was set to drop in a few weeks on September 26th. Around this time, a tragic story had just made national news. 11-year-old Robert Yummy Sandifer was murdered by his own gang in Chicago.
Yummy Sandifer was this young man out of Chicago. He was about 10 years old at the time, but he was also a gangster and a killer.
Yummy was a kid caught up in the gang life, ordered to take out rival members. Inspired by those around him, he ended up shooting multiple people, including a 14-year-old girl who sadly lost her life.
Chicago police quickly identified 11-year-old Robert Sandifer as the gunman.
After Yummy went into hiding, his own gang saw the heat coming their way and decided to silence him. They sent 2 teenage members to kidnap and execute him. His story quickly became a national headline, even making the front page of Time magazine.
Gang leaders decided that Robert needed to be silenced because he knew too much, so they ordered Craig to kill him.
Pac, being who he was, took this news personally. He was deeply bothered by the idea of a kid being used like that and blamed the community for even creating a situation where someone like Yummy could exist.
Tupac, he was very angry when he read that article because his thing was like, grown men is getting kids to kill babies.
Just 2 days after Yummy's murder, still frustrated, Pac had a show booked in Milwaukee at the Mecca Arena, only about an hour and a half from Chicago. Because of how close it was, a huge chunk of the 4,000 people in attendance that night were from Chicago, including a lot of gang members hyped to see their favorite artists, especially Tupac.
In the front 3 or 4 rows, it's all gangsters. It's GDs.
So GDs, okay.
The BGDs,
right.
the folks.
Okay.
It's all gangster.
After all the opening acts wrapped up, it was finally time for Tupac to hit the stage. The crowd was hyped, chanting Tupac, Thug Life, as he stormed out, kicking things off with Bury Me a G from his upcoming Thug Life project. But right away, Pac seemed more intense, almost angry as he performed.
I was out there when I did the show, the gang was in the audience. The whole gang had bought out the stadium. Damn. So I'm rapping, I just killed this little kid. Oh. And they all screaming out Thug Life, and I felt bad, wait a minute, they got it twisted.
Midway through the song, his mic started acting up, cutting in and out. While his crew kept performing their verses, Pac was busy trying to get it working again. When it finally got fixed, he took the moment to call for a moment of silence for the little girl who had been killed because of Yummy. But before the silence even started, Pac grabbed the mic and straight up yelled, "You better stop killing those babies, or else I'll murder you myself." The whole room was stunned. The energy completely shifted. He kept going, calling out gang members, calling them cowards and busters.
And throwing up their signs. But Pac is thinking about Yummy Sandifer, and he lost it. And basically, threatened a crowd full of gangsters like, yo, y'all keep killing kids, I'll murder all you motherfuckers.
With the crowd now full of pissed off gang members, things started getting heated. Some of them, feeling disrespected, began throwing pennies and coins at the stage.
The gangsters were offended. So when Stretch cut the music back on, he started rapping again, and started throwing stuff at him. And he's just screaming and yelling at these guys, and he's offering a reward for anyone who can point out whoever threw the bottles or whatever, right? So that's what he's doing.
Pac wasn't about to let that slide. He flipped it on them, shouting that he'd give $200 to anyone who brought the person throwing coins up to him on stage. At this point, the gang members started taunting Pac and his crew, throwing up gang signs and trying to provoke them. Pac, never one to back down, dared anyone to come on stage and fight him. And that's when all hell broke loose. The place exploded into chaos, with people throwing objects back and forth between the stage and the crowd. As gang members started storming the stage, Pac grabbed a mic stand, swinging it around like a weapon, daring anyone to step up.
Next thing you know, dudes start hopping on stage like, so it broke out.
Then, someone from Pac's crew pulled out a red bag, the one they kept their guns in. Some witnesses even claimed Pac himself pulled out a gun and fired warning shots into the air to scare off the gang members.
So, I don't know, the pistol came out, there was a shot in the air.
Meanwhile, police and security rushed in, trying to control the situation and get the terrified audience out before anyone got trampled. Most of the crowd, realizing things had gone way beyond just a concert, panicked and ran for the exits. But the gang members weren't backing down. They were still trying to get to Pac. Seeing they were outnumbered, Pac and his crew made a run for it, grabbing the bag of guns and handing it off to a getaway driver, who sped off before the police could catch them. Backstage, things didn't calm down for Pac and his crew. The cops kicked in their dressing room door and searched everything, but since they didn't find any weapons, they had no choice but to let them go. The real problem, though, was outside, an angry mob of gang members still waiting to get their hands on Pac.
I went back to the room, because, you know, Pac went back to the dressing room. We all went back to the dressing room, and we was in the dressing room, and they was trying to get into the dressing room.
Knowing they had to move fast, Pac and his crew jumped into their cars and sped off to a hotel in Chicago, thinking they could lay low for the night, but the gang members weren't letting it go that easily. They knew exactly where Pac was staying and followed him there. Once they got to the hotel, they went wild, trashing the lobby, looking for Tupac and attacking anyone in their way.
We get word that the gangsters then went to the hotel that we're staying at, right across the street. And they began to ambush and ransack that hotel.
Wow.
Looking for us.
Witnesses say Pac actually wanted to go downstairs and face them, but thankfully someone in his crew was able to talk him out of it, convincing him to stay in his room. And that was the right move, because with that many angry gang members hunting for him, it could have ended badly. Eventually, the police showed up and cleared the gang out of the hotel, making it safe for Pac and Thug Life to catch a flight out the next morning. Yummy's murder and the struggles of the black community hit Pac hard and showed in his music, where he even mentioned Yummy in 2 songs, including White Man's World. Even in a prison interview, you could see a picture of Yummy hanging behind him.
I don't see it as me having this gangster thug image. Thug Life would be more accurate, but it's not an image, it's just a way of life, it's a mentality.
Moment proved just how much Pac cared about his people, so much so that he wasn't afraid to call out anyone he saw as a threat to the culture, even if it meant standing up to an entire crowd of gang members. Yummy's story is nothing short of tragic. Robert "Yummy" Sandifer was born on March 12, 1983 in Chicago, Illinois, into a life that seemed doomed from the start. His mother, Lorena Sandifer, was deep into street life, with over 30 arrests, many tied to and drugs. His father, Robert Akins, wasn't in the picture at all. He was locked up on a felony gun charge and never played a role in Yummy's life. From the time he was just a baby, Yummy experienced nothing but before he even turned 3. Illinois' Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, already had him on their radar. Medical exams showed he had burns on his arms and neck, possibly from cigarettes, and bruises that looked like he'd been beaten with objects.
The child was from a home without the proper upbringing that he needed. He had 5 years old, and you gonna take a 22-month baby to the hospital with cigarette burns on his butt? Please, that's brutality on that child.
At first, his mother blamed his father for the abuse, but later she changed her story. Either way, Yummy never really had a safe or loving home to grow up in. By 1987, things got so bad that DCFS stepped in and removed Yummy and his siblings from their mother's care. They were sent to live with their grandmother in Chicago's Roseland neighborhood, but life there wasn't much better. At times, the house was packed with up to 19 kids, and the environment was chaotic. There wasn't much guidance or supervision decision, and Yummy was left to navigate the streets on his own. By the time he was just 8 years old, Yummy had already given up on school. Instead of sitting in a classroom, he spent his days running the streets, stealing cars, and breaking into houses. The streets became his real home. By age 10, he had already been arrested for armed robbery.
You live across the street from Robert. Did you know him? What did he look like? If I was to see him on the street, what would I see?
Dark skin, short, braids in his hair.
What was he like?
Bad.
Bad? Like, when you say bad, what do you mean?
Fighting, stealing, breaking in people's houses.
A psychological evaluation at the time painted a heartbreaking picture. Yummy was a kid who felt completely abandoned, with no encouragement or support from anyone. The examiner noted that he had a deep sense of failure that had taken over his entire being. With no real family structure, no one to guide him, and no sense of belonging, Yummy ended up finding what he thought was a family in the streets. But that so-called family would ultimately lead to his downfall. By 1993, Yummy's life took another turn. He and his siblings were removed from their grandmother's already overcrowded home and sent to the Lawrence Hall DCFS shelter on Chicago's north side. But Yummy wasn't the type to stay put. Not long after arriving, he ran away, and he never went back. From that point on, his whereabouts became unclear. No one really knew where he was living or how he was surviving. But one thing was certain, he was still out in the streets, still getting into trouble, and still racking up arrests. By the summer of 1994, at just 11 years old, Yummy had already built a reputation in Chicago's Roseland neighborhood. The older members of the Black Disciples saw potential in him, not as a kid to protect, but as a useful asset. Since he was so young, the police wouldn't suspect him the same way they would an older gang member. So on August 28, 1994, Yummy was given an order. He had to prove himself. His mission was to ambush rival gang members. That Sunday evening, all hell broke loose. Around 6 p.m., witnesses saw Yummy shoot a 16-year-old boy, leaving him with a spinal cord injury. But that was just the beginning. A few hours later, Yummy returned, this time armed with a 9mm pistol. He opened fire on a group of kids playing football in the neighborhood. In the chaos, 14-year-old Shaven Dean was struck in the head by a bullet. She had just been walking a friend home, making sure she got there safely. Another 16-year-old boy was hit in the hand, and just like that, Yummy disappeared.
Among the dead, 14-year-old Siobhan Dean, shot in the head by a stray bullet during a shooting spree in the city's Roseland neighborhood that injured 2 other teens.
As soon as the shootings happened, police launched a citywide manhunt for Yummy, but finding him wasn't easy. He was hiding out with fellow gang members who were trying to keep him away from the authorities. For 3 days, he was on the run. Then, on August 31st, he reached out to his grandmother, trying to call her from a neighbor's porch. He told the neighbor he wanted to turn himself in. He even asked for prayers. Like deep down, he knew the walls were closing in. But before he could surrender, 2 boys showed up. Craig Hardaway, 16, and Derek Hardaway, 14. Both were members of the Black Disciples, the same gang Yummy had been running with. They told him they were taking him somewhere safe, out of town. Yummy believed them. Maybe he thought they were really looking out for him. He got into the car without hesitation, but instead of being taken to safety, Yummy was driven to a railroad underpass at East 108th Street and South Dauphin Avenue. When they got there, he was ordered to get on his knees. Before he could even process what was happening, 2 gunshots rang out. Yummy was shot twice in the back of the head. His body was discovered by police in the early hours of September 1st, 1994.
It was an unusually chilly September night in 1994 as the body of an 11-year-old was loaded into the back of an ambulance. He had been shot twice in the back of the head.
The reason behind the hit was cold and calculated. One of the brothers later admitted that a higher-up in the gang had given the order. Yummy had become a liability. He was cop bait. He knew too much. If the police caught him, there was a real fear that he'd talk, that he'd give up names, and that the gang's leaders would end up behind bars. So rather than risk it, they got rid of him. Years later, the 2 brothers at the center of Yummy's murder finally broke their silence. In 2014, Craig and Derek Hardaway spoke about the incident for the first time. By then, Craig was 36 years old, a far cry from the 16-year-old whose mugshot had been plastered all over TV back in 1994 when he was arrested for Yummy's murder. Derek, who was just 14 at the time of the killing, had been too young for his mugshot to be released to the public. While Craig was the one who pulled the trigger, Derek was convicted for driving the getaway car. Both brothers had been caught up in the same world as Yummy. They were all members of the Black Disciples, a gang that promised loyalty and brotherhood, but ultimately proved that membership came with a deadly cost. lost. What many people didn't know was that Derek was never supposed to be involved in the actual killing. The plan was for Craig to handle it alone. But Derek couldn't walk away. A lot of people don't know that he actually took me home, Derek recalled in the interview. And I could just feel something wasn't right, so when I asked him, "What's going on?" he told me everything. I refused to let him go by himself.
A lot of people don't know that he actually took me home, and I can just feel someone right. So when I asked him what's going on, and he told me everything.
In that moment, Derek had a choice. He could have stayed out of it. He could have let his older brother handle whatever had been ordered. But instead, he stuck by Craig's side, refusing to let him face it alone. Looking back, Craig admitted he wished he had been the big brother Derek needed that night. "I should have been more of a big brother," he said. "But at the time, that ain't the way you think."
I should have been more of a big brother and just get out, right? But at the time, that ain't the way you think. I'm still a minor, we still kids.
That night sealed both of their fates. After Yummy's murder, the brothers were arrested and convicted. Craig received a 60-year sentence for murder, while Derek was given 45 years for driving the getaway car. Despite what many assumed, they weren't the only ones involved in the hit. Both brothers have said there were others who played a role in setting up Yummy's execution, but Craig and Derek were the only ones who ever faced trial. Over the years, Craig and Derek Hardaway had plenty of time to reflect on their past. Isolated from their families and abandoned by the very gang they once risked everything for, they spent more than 2 decades behind bars trying to turn their lives around. In prison, they took steps toward bettering themselves. Both brothers earned their GEDs and went on to get associate degrees. Derek, looking for a way to stay productive, developed a passion for landscaping and spent his time working in the prison garden. Craig, on the other hand, got involved in anti-violence programs, using his experience as a cautionary tale to steer younger inmates away from making the same mistakes. But for Craig, there was one thing that still weighed heavily on his conscience. He wanted to reach out to Yummy's family. Despite his efforts, they never responded to him or to media requests, including from WGN. Still, he hoped that one day he'd have the chance to speak to them. "I'll answer any questions that they may have concerning that night leading up to that night," Craig said.
What would you say to them?
Wow, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll answer any questions that they may have.
Even after so many years, Yummy's murder never left their minds. It was something they thought about every single day. But while the tears had long since dried up, the regret never faded. Instead of dwelling in guilt, they focused on the future, on getting out, on doing better, and on making sure that other kids didn't end up on the same path that had led them to prison. Craig understood that not everyone would be willing to hear them out. He knew that people would judge them, and he didn't blame them. "I know most people will listen to this and be like, what the hell does this dude know? He'd been in jail for 20 years. He shouldn't have did what he did," Craig admitted. That still don't take away from the message. Value your life. You matter. Look in the mirror and tell yourself that you matter. By the time their releases were approaching, both brothers had already made up their minds about one thing. They weren't going back to the Roseland neighborhood where they grew up. Too much had happened there, too many bad memories, and more importantly, the same street life that led them to prison in the first place was still alive and well. They knew if they went back, they'd either end up locked up again or dead. Derek was the first to get out, walking free in December 2016. Craig followed 4 years later, in December 2020.